This is Required Watching, where we watch the essential films from lists of cinematic influencers and look at them through the lens about learning about filmmaking and how to move forward. I'm your host, Trey Epps, and today we're talking about a detective investigating a man's death in the mountains who meets the dead man's mysterious wife over the course of investigation. This film is directed by Park Chun Wook, and it stars Park Hai Il and Tang Wei. I'm so sorry. I'm likely butchering all of these names, so I sincerely apologize. But this is Decisions to Leave.
One of the things I love about this film, which is about voyeurism, surveillance, watching, is the way that you use everyday technology in the detective story, cell phones, surveillance video, smartwatches. Um, and it's very natural to how we all use smartphones and the way that we leave little traces of ourselves in the digital ether. But I also love the way you visualize the text messages in so many different ways on screen. You give us a cell phone POV shot a couple of times. So I just wanted to know how you sort of thought about visualizing the technology that is so integral to our lives, but how do you put that on screen? How do you make it cinematic?
일상생활에 많이 보여지고 있는 CCTV나 스마트폰을 어떤 식으로 시각화시켰는지. 사실 제가 제일 피하고 싶었던 것이었어요. 이런 스마트폰 뭐 디바이스들, 모던 테크놀로지 이런 것들은.
So actually, smartphone and all these devices was the last thing I wanted to deal with.
그래서 처음 트리트먼트를 쓰고 나서 이렇게 많은 문자 메시지 장면이 등장한다는 사실을 스스로 깨닫고 절망했습니다.
So when I came up with the first treatment and having seen, looking at this whole bunch of text messages, I was like, oh no, this is going to be a problem.
이게 나는 클래시컬하고 엘리건트한 로맨스 영화를 만들려고 했는데 그러면 막 그 질 좋은 그 텍스처가 느껴지는 질 좋은 종이에 만년필로 잉크로 이렇게 아주 고풍스러운 엘리건트한 필체로 손편지를 써서 보내고 이래도 시원찮을 마당에 이게 무슨 10대들도 아니고 무슨 문자 메시지가 이렇게 많이 나오나.
So I was imagining, because this is should be a classical, elegant romance movie. I was imagining writing with a fountain pen in a very beautiful, elegant handwriting on a beautiful piece of paper. But this is something like a teenagers exchanging a whole bunch of texts.
그래서 이게 시대 배경을 무슨 뭐 40년대 50년대 그 우리의 그 할리우드의 고전 필름 노아처럼 그 시대로 바꿔야 되나 이런 생각까지 했어요 심지어.
So I even thought maybe I should change the period to 40s or 50s of Hollywood's so-called conventional noir period.
그러나 저는 그 이런 고전적인 우아함만큼이나 현대인의 삶에 밀착한 그런 리얼리즘도 이 영화에서는 중요하다고 봤기 때문에 처음부터 목표였기 때문에 그렇게 과거로 돌아갈 수는 없었습니다.
However, as important as it is to sort of convey this classical elegance to the movie, I thought it was also important to portray this realism of this contemporary period. So I thought this is a very important element for the film.
All right, so we're back on the Oscar nominated or Oscar contenders of 2022. 2022? How do they name it? Do they name the Oscars based on the previous year or the year that they're in? Anyways, the Oscars for this year. And Decision to Leave has been certainly one of the most talked about foreign films I've seen pop up in quite some time. So I was super excited late last year or in the fall of last year to get my hands on it. When it comes to foreign films, I'm so excited to finally announce that the pendulum has swung. I think we're completely over the idea that films are too long or we have to read. I think it's finally accepted, even in this limited wide release, but it has been accepted uh, as film as like a normal film to watch, right? Hallelujah. More and more each week, I'm looking at theaters around the country and around the world in English speaking countries and seeing what they're showing, and more foreign films, specifically films that are subtitled and not in that home language, are showing up. And honestly, it's quite the relief. It's quite the relief that it's happening. Um, so to that, I say, let's not turn back. Let's keep it going. With reviewing The Handmaiden last year, we were in love with the twists and turns from the movie that led to an explosive conclusion. With Decisions to Leave, we felt the exact same way. The storytelling feels inventive and fresh, and the performances are top notch. I love to get my hands on the script to completely understand what was being interpreted from the script by the director or what was in the script in itself, because sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not. The story treats POVs and almost plays out like one of those old mystery novels, and we're finding out things as our protagonist is. And we're also able to weave in and out of the lives and the characters and kind of the thought process. It's this weird surrealist um, spin on a film on a like a thriller film that I haven't experienced before. That has nothing to do with like any kind of sci-fi, like magic tricks or anything like that. It just felt really the visual choices and the visual language of this film felt very unique to this movie and something that I haven't seen before. Um, and I think it really lends to the idea that like we don't know who or what to believe. Like as an audience, we are also out of the loop because we don't know what it is that we're watching yet, and we have to put the pieces together as a protagonist does, as that character does, as things are presented in front of us. And I think now that I'm even talking about it, I think what actually happens is the movie becomes almost or at least at times, because it becomes an unreliable narrator, and that it fools us into thinking one thing, and it takes us into places without the traditional way of us getting there, if that makes sense. So it kind of plays tricks on us. In the end, though, this film is a tragedy. No happy endings. And if I am feeling a pattern, especially from The Handmaiden, I hope that it continues. It actually makes this. I hope the director really does make a pattern out of making tragedies in this traditional sense, because this unhappiness, this unrelenting like sadness that happens and that we live in feels both rooted in real circumstance and real situation, as well as it taking this almost extraordinary turn, right? Like there's always something that you're like, this would never happen, but yet it feels almost just out of reach. Like these situations and these characters, even, or maybe the characters feel are the bit that's most grounded because we can relate to them. We understand the decisions that they have to make, no pun intended. But the situation feels just out of reach for a normal person. So it's interesting. It's interesting to watch. With, of course, guys, spoilers, but with the suicide of one of the characters in the search for her at the very end, it's clear that this isn't a story of star-crossed lovers, as much as it's an entanglement of lives and loves. And without giving too much away, sorry, I really enjoyed this film, and how it played out with what we, the audience, are meant to know and aren't meant to know, and the whole surrealism of it all. Um, I would say that of a lot of the movies that I've seen in the last year, this one truly gives an experience for the audience. It allows you to feel things and use your senses in ways that not a lot of movies really tap into. Um, um, yeah, I think it reminded me of Knives Out, of that same feeling that Knives Out gave me, except with a slightly brewed, longer version. Like a little bit more depth that gave the characters and the story something a bit more to go off of. So if you can't tell, of course, I think this movie is required to watch. Again, I think there's a lot that we can glean from this film that would suggest that the script was really really strong. Um, when it's written or at least co-written by one of the directors or the director, feels like, honestly, I think when I watch movies that are written and directed by the same person and then I read the script, especially if it's a script that comes out before like a lot of the awards, I love to see the differences. I love to see what they're pulling off based on what they can see in their head, and the sometimes the freedom that they allow the actors to give, or the situation or the budget, whatever that may happen, that like there's some visual change versus what's on the page. um but I think, again, no different than like the Handmaiden, the visual language is so specific, so specific. It's so um I think from writing to directing to even the acting, it's really something to examine and something to take real part in. I feel like I have a lot of things I say about a lot of these roles that aren't original, but the acting, the best thing about the acting was that it was vulnerable. It felt like real people, and maybe that's because I don't know them as actors in Korea. Um, so I don't have any kind of preconceived notions the same way I do with some of the films that are American or English speaking. So it was great to see that vulnerability and watch these actors kind of melt away and not have that preconceived notion of their personas. Anyways, Decision to Leave is streaming. If you have Mubi in the Western countries, I don't know where it's streaming otherwise, but take a look. Again, for the month of January, we are looking at Oscar contenders, or at least movies that were in conversation for potentially being nominated for the Oscars for this year. If you have seen this movie, I would love to know what you think. What am I missing? What should people know about this film? And furthermore, if you guys, have seen a movie and you're like, this has been talked about for big awards and it makes no sense, why? Or if you're like, I've seen this movie and no one's talking about it, let me know. I'm very interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Again, Required Watching is a film club, so if we're not chatting, it's just me talking to a camera. And actually, it's not too bad to do that. But I'd much rather talk to people and continue conversations about one of the pure joys in life, and that's filmmaking and television. So that said, have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Peace.